Leclerc.
Charles Leclerc!
Welcome to Negative Camber, the Motorsport Show.
Far enough back, he's going to make the lunge down the inside!
The ultimate pit stop.
The safety car is coming in.
Fueling your passion for motorsport.
With an emotional moment that means everything.
All of the latest results, analysis, and interviews.
Roar the drivers on to the final lap of this race.
I'm Jamie Lemura, motorsport enthusiast, historian, and media presenter.
And I'm Leigh Harrison, motorsport professional, Sprintmaster Australia race driver, and Formula One alumni.
We've got some royalty. Well, we'll go that far as saying it's royalty here. We've got we've got an actual professional racing driver in our hands here. We've got Todd Hazelwood. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. It's cool to be part of the show and look forward to having a decent chat and being part of it all.
Now, take the honour as our first special guest on the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. We've hyped you up for how many weeks?
Special. Define special. Let's see how we go.
Well, special enough that I could give you a snapshot of your career to date, and I haven't even included your junior ranks, but we'll go with 2013 Shannon Supercar Showdown winner, 2014 Mike Cable Young Gun Award winner, 2016 Supercars Privateers Cup champ, and the 2017 Dunlop Super 2 champion. Not a bad resume, buddy.
Thank you. Yeah, and hopefully there's more to achieve and we can keep kicking goals as we keep moving forward. But it's been a pretty unbelievable career so far. I never thought I'd be doing what I do today as a professional living, and feel incredibly grateful and actually be sitting here on the podcast tonight with Leigh, who was one of the men that helped make it all happen. So it's quite ironic to be sitting here tonight, and can't wait to talk all about it.
Mate, he welled up when he saw that Facebook post of yours the other day when you're from A1 Engines, where you sort of talked all your bitumen and also your dirt kart record and the relationship you have with A1. So that was very sweet of you, mate. He was pretty chuffed. But I guess while you sort of rolled that out, how did the relationship between you two guys start, really?
Well, from my end, it was I went to a race meeting at Barossa and I wasn't really racing at all. And I think my brother and his friend had become friends with your sister through some other race meetings. And I was sitting and watching in the grandstands and I liked what the kid did. So I think it was one of your first race meetings. You were still on P's and learned a bit about your story. You'd come from the dirt and all that sort of stuff. And you wanted to progress. And I sort of pulled your mum and dad aside and said, listen, if there's anything I can do to help you, please feel free to let me know. And it sort of started from there. Before we knew it, we were hanging out and I was spinning spanners for you.
Yeah, and essentially we embarked on travelling around the country, and we had, Leigh would come away with us and we'd be camping out of the tent and living on the side of the road and doing all sorts of crazy and wonderful things. But Leigh and I shared a lot of success together, and right down to the fact if it wasn't for Leigh, we wouldn't have been able to do a lot of racing. We wouldn't have been able to achieve what we achieved, particularly in bitumen karting. It was a hell of a journey back then. We were racing nearly 40 times a year at one point in 2 different categories. So there was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes, and as anyone would appreciate, when you're involved in karting, there's a hell of a lot of groundwork involved, and Leigh was one of the key men that helped make my karting career blossom and come to life. And looking back at it now, it's some of my most memorable years in karting, and in particular for racing. It was looking back at it was a lot of fun, and wouldn't change it any other way.
It's funny that you say that, because I don't know whether I'm sure you guys have seen the movie Senna, but they right at the very end of the movie they actually pose a question to him as one of the reporters, and what was his favourite form of motorsport, and you'd expect him to say Formula One, but he actually says karting was his favourite. Because of the fact that there was no politics, depending on who you listen to, there was no politics, but it was just pure racing in its purest form, but it was also grassroots as well. So it's really interesting that you, being a professional racing driver, almost say exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that echoes for a lot of drivers when they work their way up and it starts to become a profession, and where obviously when you're racing, it just feels like it is just you and the kart, as opposed to now what I do now. I'm involved in a team that involves 55 people working full-time in a factory, and you're just one of the small cogs that helps turn the wheel, whereas in karting it really just feels like it's just you and the kart. It's so raw. There's only a few little elements that you can play with to get the difference over your competitors, and I think that's what all of us love, is that you can just look for the 1%ers and it's in your face. You can actually change every element, and it does reward effort, karting, which is something that I'm a big believer in. You only get what you put into it. So, I still love karting today and wish I could do more of it.
Yeah. So what were your categories that you raced in when you were sort of in karting? We'll go bitumen, I guess, and then we can touch on dirt. You hear about Biscuits on the weekend?
Biscuits did a great job on the weekend.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, third in the SA titles at
P3,
Blanchard.
I did see that.
So is Todd's clearly familiar with the legend that is Biscuits?
He knows of the biscuit, yes.
Oh, God.
Going well.
Too well, some may say. We spent a lot of time with the J, didn't we? Racing junior light, junior heavy, dabbled with the junior clubman kart as well. And you didn't really get to play in seniors very much. You had moved on since before that.
Yeah, essentially, basically did all my bitumen racing in juniors. And when it come time to move to seniors, is essentially when I made the skip into circuit racing and then progressed into Formula Ford. But essentially moved into bitumen karting in the start of 2008. As Leigh touched on, coming from dirt, I essentially was starting again, so I was back on P plates, racing junior national light. Did my first race meeting at Bolivar, which was my home track, growing up here in Adelaide myself with the family. So turned up to Bolivar and we started last every race and we ended up winning the final and we got first in our first race meeting in bitumen, which was probably a bit of a surprise to some, but we put the hard work in behind the scenes and I was competitive by nature. I didn't want to come second, and it's funny, I still remember the conversation I had with dirt because we had a pretty successful upbringing in dirt karting and felt like we achieved what we needed to achieve before progressing. So it was still kind of remember the conversation when we progressed in the bitumen, and Dad said, look, it's probably not going to be all your way now, son. Like, you got to get prepared to lose. And we kind of had that conversation because we knew it was going to be a tough battle and never expected to go out and just win our first race meeting on P plates. So it was a bit of a rude shock to the system, and I suppose that was the start of what ended up becoming a pretty epic. When was that? 2011 was my final race meeting at the SA Open State Titles here in Monardo, where we won the blue plate and junior clubman to finish in my karting career per se. So it was a cool way to finish it all. But
You still got your car? You still kept it, or has it gone the way of the dodo now?
No, I remember selling my AX8, which was probably my favourite chassis. I sold that to Phil Morrison for $800 because we were desperate for every piece of or any coin that we could get to try and obviously help to make that next step. So I remember the last race meeting, we had for sale signs on pretty much everything. We sold our engines, we sold our trailer, we sold all the spares, the sprockets, the axles, this, that and the other, and all I had left was a broken wheel changer. So I found that in the shed at home the other day, so I might fix it up and get it going again. But that's literally all we had left. But I do still have my first brand new go-kart that we purchased, which was a dirt kart. So that was actually what they call a brand racing kart, Gambler. So that's actually one of the last Gambler chassis that was made by the Brown family. So that's still hanging up in the shed at home, collecting dust. Dad waiting for me to do something with it. I've got my race-winning ARC Clubman motor that I won the state title with, because that was actually the last event that they ran the ARC water cooleds for that year. So after that, they were getting phased out. So they essentially become a bone anchor overnight. So we elected to keep that one because it didn't owe us anything. We got it gifted to us at the time and turned out to be a really fast race motor. So that worked out well. But the J motors we sold off, and the rest is...
The trailer's still kicking. Well, the trailer was at AKC on the weekend.
Was it really?
Yeah, Gaddy from Northern Territories bought it off the Maxwell's.
There you go.
I pulled up, and where we were pitting, I was sitting there, I was looking at the trailer, and I was, that looks familiar, that trailer, and walked around the back of it. Still got the BRK stickers on the back of it. Yeah, so the trailer, it lives on.
It's done another trip.
Another trip.
Adelaide to Darwin.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
How are your parents, by the way? And the thing I love about your story is you've made it. Like, in terms of getting to the dream, which was V8 Supercars. But whenever it's on a Saturday and you're driving past Glynde, right, and it's almost become tradition, look to your left and there's the blue tent and your mum and dad are there, cooking the barbecue and all that sort of stuff. And for me, and I've touched on it before, because a couple of years ago when we did the tribute race for you at Paraka, being a parent, I think it's the best thing, like to see the sacrifices that they make and continue to make, right, which is it's so grassroots, but that's largely funded your racing and all these sort of local sponsors and supporters like Slape and Bianco's and that over time that have chipped in.
Yeah, 100%. And, we're a very close-knit family. And I think that all starts from karting, to be honest. Us as a family, we all went away racing together, and that included my sister Lauren, who's 2 years older than me, and she essentially dedicated her time away from school going to the racetrack with the family, and we lived out of the car, lived out of the trailer, camped on the side of the road, and did all those sorts of things. And I think as a family, you learn what's important in life, and it's surrounding yourself with your family, and we become very close. And essentially, if it wasn't for the work from my parents and my sister, particularly trying to make progress and make that next step, the commitment that was required just from a workload point of view was tremendous, and it still is today. So I'm incredibly grateful for their commitment, because it simply wouldn't have happened, and especially with the commercial support we had at the time, it was never going to be achievable. So as you mentioned, doing the fundraising efforts and thinking outside the square of how we could try and find some money to try and at least attempt to keep the dream alive, because there was many instances where our back was completely against the wall, if not past the wall. We didn't even know how the hell we're going to make the next event most of the time, particularly early on in the Formula 4 to Formula 3 days. It's a pretty tough mindset as a kid, and then when you get to the position where you put in where you essentially mum and dad are having to take money out of the house and put when it gets to that level, that's even greater again. So it's certainly teaches you a lot in life of what's important, and like you said, I feel very lucky that I've got parents that has essentially dedicated their whole life to helping me become successful in motorsport. Yeah, because it's I don't know what other way we could have done it than the approach that we had. Yep.
And I guess we can touch on a few of the, I suppose, the step from getting into V8 Supercars. Now, I guess it's almost a unique way to an extent where, reality TV, I guess you could say, with FPR running the Shannon Supercar Showdown. So how did that all come about? Like, how were you given the opportunity, and then where did the road take you from there?
Yeah, well, and probably going 2 steps back from that was that, we were pretty much stuffed at that point. Like, we were in 2013, so I'd just done a year of Formula 4. We did 5 race meetings. We did essentially 0 testing in the oldest car in the field, and I personally struggle where you come out racing go-karts 30 times a year to racing 4 times a year in a foreign race car was a big challenge. And just racing against guys that were triple if not quadruple the budgets of what we were doing was pretty tough. And then Formula 3, we were sort of doing it race by race and not really sure what the future was going to hold at that point. Obviously the dream was big, but reality was starting to kick in some ways. And I actually reached out to the producers of the Shannon Supercar Showdown the year before. Just as a kid, you're trying to do anything and everything to work out a way of how can I put myself out there to the general public and to people within motorsport, and hope that if you do okay, you might get an opportunity. And first time come around, they said thanks but no thanks, and which was expected because it was my first year out of karting and I was still sort of unknown and to some degree. And I was in year 12 driving home from school one day in the old Nissan Pintara and got a phone call from this Melbourne company, and obviously picked up the phone and realised that they asked me to be part of a reality TV show, which had been the Shannon Supercar Showdown, and said it was going to be involved with FPR, which for me, being a one-eyed Ford supporter growing up as a kid, was kind of like, oh wow, wasn't expecting this. And
you tickle my heart.
It was I could just see my future in an instance, like Todd walking around in an FPR suit, as a dream, you just instantly thought, oh, this could be amazing. And it turned out to be quite the opportunity, and obviously went on to progress in the show, which was quite a cool experience within itself, visiting what was the factory Ford team at the time of FPR, visiting the workshop, first time really getting up and close and personal with any of the supercar drivers, obviously with Will Davison and Mark Winterbottom. And Will was a driver that I always personally looked up to as a kid growing up, really liked what he what he did overseas and his commitment to the sport and his professionalism I always sort of looked up to. So to actually sort of rub shoulders with him, and then for him to actually handpick me to go into the finals was pretty special. And then to get my first taste in a supercar. So that was the first time I ever drove a supercar, was in competition for that reality TV show. And it obviously ended up being quite successful, and we won the show, and essentially gave me at least one foot. What am I trying to say here? One
racing foot in the door.
One foot in the door is what I was trying to spit out there. With Full Performance Racing, and obviously started to have many conversations with Tim Edwards, and it was fortunate but unfortunate the way it all sort of finished. They didn't have a position for me available in the Dunlop Super 2 series the preceding year, because I actually just signed up Cam Waters just only a matter of months. Well, not, I think it was only a matter of weeks before me, but they ideally wanted to run 2 cars with me and Cam. But the opportunity just didn't come together. So then actually got a phone call from Matt Stone a couple of weeks later, and flew up to Queensland, did a handshake deal, and come back to Adelaide and to say to Mum and Dad, I've just done a deal to run on Super 2, and this is probably what it's going to cost. And I never seen such a rude look from my dad's face either. But I knew it was going to. I knew essentially I got put in a hard spot, saying if you don't take the deal, basically the deal's off. So just felt like this is a too good of an opportunity to knock back, and now I just got to work out how the hell we actually make it happen.
Yeah. You've seen the footage of Todd's final test on
Yeah, I think I watched that whole year. Obviously, I had a bit of a vested interest in that show, so I watched most of the episodes, if not once but twice. But obviously the support doesn't end when you stop working together. You follow it right through. So watched the show, and big supporter, and cheered him on every step of the way.
Now, I a couple of years ago, I think when you put it up on Facebook, was the first time that I actually saw the footage of it, like the actual telecast. And there's I love the bit where, because I don't know, at that era, what was it, 2013, 2014, something like that, that was when the FPR cars actually sounded the best, in my opinion. They had that whale, growly type sound. They were the most distinctive sounding Ford motor in the grid. Like, even when you could see the Dunlop Super 2, you could hear that it's like, yeah, that's an FPR car. And I actually wish they got that sound back, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But there's one bit that I love, and it's where Will and Frosty are actually watching. I think they're standing and they're commenting about the actual lap, but they're not actually seeing it. They're sitting by. I think they're standing by the transporter, and you can actually hear you whizzing past down the main straight and then going through, I think, what was a chicane, or it sounded like
it was a man-made chicane.
A man-made chicane.
So
and just the commitment that you could, even back then, that you could tell that they were like, shit, this kid's the real deal. And it was, I love it. One, because the motor sounded great, but then two, it was the commitment,
Yeah.
Just the look on their faces when they can hear it and they know that the kid's committed.
Yeah.
It's all stepping into place.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
but
it was a pretty cool moment. Yeah, like just be strapped in first time in a supercar that day, and Will Davison took us for a lap. So I was sitting in the passenger seat, and that was sort of my first taste of a supercar. I was like, it rides curbs pretty better than what I thought, and brakes really hard. And I just remember Will saying, like, just don't be afraid to stand on the brake pedal. And obviously that's a big part of making a lap time in supercar. So did exactly that. Kind of felt the pitch and yaw of the car, sort of how aggressive Will was driving. For at least got to have a crack, Got nothing. Really at that point at that stage of where I was in my career, it was like that was nothing to lose approach, and it probably showed, because it was a pretty wild couple of laps, but we managed to string enough laps together where it was fast enough to win the show by, I think, less than a tenth of a second. So I only just scraped through, but a win's a win, and
take it.
That's
a great opportunity.
By an inch or a mile, wins a win.
Yeah.
What's it been like giving Dad a taste back of what it's like to drive a supercar? I saw the lap was it Sandown you took him for a drive?
Yeah.
And he welled up a little bit in the passenger seat. So what was that like, getting to repay Dad for all of his sacrifice with a hot lap?
Yeah, Sandown in particular was actually really cool. Being Dad's 60th birthday the following day, so it was a perfect 60th.
Yeah.
Present in my eyes for him, and obviously, he loves it. But he's not a big fan of actually being a passenger. I took him for out of all tracks, like he's done obviously done Sandown now, which is pretty wild as a passenger because, especially turn 6 is a pretty wild approach and getting thrown over curbs and stuff. You're pretty violent. You kind of feel like you're being ragdolled a bit.
That's at the end of Dandenong.
Yeah. And he's also done Townsville, but he actually struggled with Simmons Plains the most, which I find ironic.
Really?
So he really struggled there just with the closing speeds and, and the commitment through around the back bend there, which doesn't look like much of a bend, but in the car, the car's got so much attitude, it's flexing up, and it's doing all sorts of crazy
so
things.
So that's the 180, the turn 3, the
tight hairpin.
The tight hairpin.
Yeah. So he didn't like that one. But look, you watch the onboard footage, and he just sits there with his arms folded and just takes it in. And it's funny because obviously we talk about setup a lot and what we're trying to find in the car behind the scenes. Just because Dad's curious, he's mechanically minded and wants to know what's going on and make sure I'm on path with what I think's right. And it was after they said, what tyre pressure were you running and how were the brakes and this and that and the other. So he's still very switched on.
So he wasn't like Henry Ford 2 and Ford versus Ferrari where they stop and he just starts bursting in tears.
He didn't shit his pants. So he took it well, and it was very cool because there's not too many sports where you can literally put someone in the hot seat and show them exactly what you can do. And that particular session there at Sandown, like we're on the softer tyre, we had decent brakes on the car and the track conditions were favourable, so the lap time would have only been no more than 2 seconds off qualifying, which is still a pretty committed lap around Sandown. So
that was the Monday after the race meet.
Correct. So a lot of rubber on the circuit and so forth. So he got a good lap of what it's like, and he loved it.
Oh, good on him. Your mum's is a beauty. I love Sharon, but I remember when we stayed in the pit area for when you had your first 500 in the main game, and we were watching behind the monitors, and for the whole race, I think it was the race 2 on the Sunday, she had her fingers crossed like this, right, and she had it behind her back, and they didn't move for the whole 2 hours of the event. I can't do it any more than 5 minutes. I don't know how the hell she does it, but I think she does. It's almost like a habit. She'll do it it's like a good luck charm.
I know they're stuck like that. She's done it.
She's done it for that long, and I think if anyone knows what Sharon's like behind in the pit area, you probably just ask Leigh. I think Leigh would have way more stories than what I have. So Mum used to be pretty vocal back in the karting days. I think she's calmed down a bit more that there's a roof over my head. But she's still obviously a nervous wreck. She still doesn't manage the nerves that well, and as she said, she religiously has anything and everything crossed watching the races. And I think she said she's pretty much got arthritis in her fingers now because she's got
I'm not surprised.
I've seen some people take videos and photos of her while I'm racing, and poor Shaz, it really gets to her. But she's got a heart of gold. And speaking of hot laps, she's probably the complete opposite to Dad. She's the worst passenger I've ever had. And that was at Barbagallo.
I don't doubt that for 1 second.
I would be disowned as a child if I was to have upload that to Facebook.
All right, you got to give us a hint, man. Screaming, carrying on.
There is a lot.
Be screaming, carrying on. Todd, slow down, Todd.
So there's that. As I've left the pit box into pit lane, I'm thinking, oh no, I'm not even on the racetrack yet. So
bless you, Sharon.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have such an amazing, supportive mother because she's been literally the backbone behind my career and for so long. Back to the days when Mum was driving me around and Leigh was pit crewing for me while Dad was paying the bills, working away on weekends. So
she I guess we can go back to the Matt Stone era because that was really the first time that I'd seen you. So obviously we can talk about the 500 after because I know that's a pretty big topic for all of us, but the first time I'd seen you, I reckon you were racing an ex-Stone Brothers Falcon with iSeat sponsorship. It was a blue and white car. I reckon that was it was the first time in the main game for you, in Super 2. So that would have been
2014.
2014, yeah. And you could tell back then, I'm thinking Hazelwood, a South Aussie guy, because they obviously are the PA. And you could just watch the race. I'm thinking, shit, that's all right. He's doing okay, this kid. But how was your time with Matt Stone? Because you guys went through a fair journey together, from Super 2 to the main game, really, and everything in between. You look back on those days fondly?
Yeah, massively. Great memories. A lot of great people that I worked with in that time, and still really good mates with today. And again, incredibly grateful for Matt sort of handpicking me as he took me out of quite a few drivers to take a punt with, and saw something in me, and I walked into his office, or into what was a pretty plain workshop at the time, back in that was at the end of 2013, and flew up to Queensland. Matt picked me up at the airport, and shook hands and embarked on a journey we could never have imagined it would have been as successful and been able to do the things that we did. But if it wasn't for that commitment from Matt initially, and then obviously additionally to that, then meeting Jason Gomersall at my first Adelaide 500 event, because we turned up to Adelaide with no sponsors on the car. We mortgaged the house to get started, because as I said, we made this commitment to run in Super 2, but we had sponsorship not even to do. We hardly had enough sponsorship for the whole year to do the first round. Yep. Our bank loan got approved the Wednesday night of Adelaide 500. So although we signed a contract, we actually didn't have any money to do it, essentially. So it was
bloody hell.
It was quite a big commitment, obviously, and a lot of pressure. It was very stressful months leading into the first round, being the Adelaide 500. We did the one test day at Queensland Raceway, and actually went pretty well. And embarked on what was a huge journey together. And I lived with Matt for a couple of years. Obviously got to be part of his journey in some ways as well. Him and Nina got married, they had kids, and I was a part of all that as well, living with them at the time. And then obviously the growth of the workshop, which went from just a couple cars to then at one point I think we had nearly 10 cars in the workshop at one stage, when they were doing V8 Utes and TCM and any GT racing. Like, there was a lot of stuff happening in the time that I was there, and obviously started working for the team full time at the end of 2015, all the way up to till my services at the end of 2019. So it was a big chapter in my life. Learnt so much, obviously working under the Stone family in particular, obviously with Jimmy Stone, Matt's dad, being a main figure in the team, and rubbing shoulders with some SBR royalty, which was obviously a team that I adored growing up as a kid, being a Ford supporter. So to be amongst those guys and amongst that knowledge was massive for me. Look back on it and go, geez, that was pretty cool what we did. I felt like we always sort of punched above our weight, and we kind of made things out of nothing, and always threw wild ideas at Matt, and Matt was certainly not a guy for saying no. He'd always like a challenge, and we embarked on obviously moving into the main series in 2018, and now that they've expanded now and pretty professional 2-car outfit and supercars.
Yep. And we can talk about title year 2017, because that was when you had, and forgive me, I don't know the history of the cars prior to that, but you had the ex-Craig Lowndes 888, what was then the old Caltex Vortex livery.
Correct. Yep.
So pretty heady piece of kit, and you could tell. I remember that year that Josh Keane was still racing at Brad Jones, and you guys went in for a bit of a duke out for qualifying for that year's 500, the Clipsal 500, and you could tell that you meant business that year, because you'd stole pole. I wouldn't say steal it. You dominated it, and I think you got him by about 3 or 4 tenths of a second. And then lights went out, race 1, and they never saw you after that. It was just, and you think, shit, this is the year, What was it like with 888 equipment compared to what you had previously?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting transition for both the sport and myself. Obviously, as you mentioned before, I first started when I was running an ex-Stone Brothers built Ford Falcon, and they were really good race cars, but terrible qualifying. So I could never seem to qualify the thing well. And I think based on the knowledge I know now, it's probably just because our cars were so soft and we could never get the tyre to work in qualifying. But at the start of 2016 it was. So that was my first first year driving Triple Eight equipment, and it was an introduction of Car of the Future being introduced in the Dunlop Super 2 series. So it was a lot of uncertainty for the category, or unknowns, I should say, for both the drivers and the teams, particularly the privateer teams being Matt Stone Racing, who had never worked on one of these Car of the Futures before, and going up against the power weights of our Super 2 at that time. So we still had FPR or ProDrive, as we know now. They were running a car with their knowledge, obviously being the main series. We're already for a few years with that Car of the Future knowledge, was we're all starting from scratch. So I sort of headhunted a few engineers at the time and was looking for options, and headhunted Wes McDougall, who had just got out of Erebus Motorsport due to health reasons, and was looking for a way to try and get back into sport, but not too heavy and not too full on for him. So handpicked Wes, and we went out and put it on pole for our first race, first qualifying session together, which was cool. But 2016 was up and down. We had fast car, but we had issues. Like 2016, we put on pole and I got a puncher for running over a piece of, it was a lens cover of a mirror, and got a puncher, from that.
Jesus.
Out of all my Super 2 racing, I never got a puncher, let alone when I qualified on pole. And when we got taken out while leading at Sandown, we had all these things happen throughout the year, and the pace was always there, but it was just scrappy. We got third, we got Privateers champion, which meant that we were the first team that wasn't aligned with a main series team in the Car of the Future program. So that was pretty cool within itself, especially being the first year. 2017, as you mentioned, we turned up and we knew we were ready. We knew we proved to us, at least to ourselves, that we knew we could do it. We just need to have a consistent, no mistakes, clean season, and that was pretty much what earned us the championship.
And then we go to Sandown, the infamous piece of footage. Probably the biggest heart attack Sharon's ever had, I'd probably go and say. I think everyone really.
Look, it was far from ideal to be put in that position, and obviously thankful to sort of walk away from that unscathed, and then to be able to drive a race car 40 minutes later. You watch a lot of those incidents, or a much more basic crash where drivers come off a hell of a lot worse. So in some ways very thankful that the safety of the car did its job and that sort of stuff. But it was just felt like it was just one of those hurdles that kind of felt like, no, this is not going to get me today. This is not going to upset what we've worked hard to achieve. At this point in 2017, this is my fourth year in the Super 2 series. We're leading the championship, starting on pole to my arch nemesis, Port Umbrella at that time. So there was no way I could miss that next race.
Not a bad arch nemesis, really.
And it was game on, because there was only one other round up left, being the Newcastle 500. So the mindset was almost sort of military like at that point. But obviously the unfamous incident being my first appearance in the main Supercars championship. That's certainly not the way I wanted to make a debut. And
you arrive with a bang, mate. Don't worry about that.
There's certainly one way to arrive on the scene, do a backflip in a supercar, and just the nervous, gut-wrenching feeling, thinking, not knowing what had happened. Obviously the car's a write-off, thinking, what the hell is Tim thinking, what's Brad thinking, what's the team thinking? Just all these emotions go through your head, and then you got to scrap that, get in another race car and try and do your job. So that was a tough weekend, probably up there with one of the biggest challenges I've faced in a racing situation, just from a mindset point of view. It was pretty daunting, and just all the wave of emotions and dealing with that, then dealing with the public, it was quite overwhelming. It was a big few weeks of my career, to say the least. But then to actually, my biggest thing is I didn't want to be known as a kid that crashed. I wanted to turn up at Newcastle. We were second in the championship after that Sandown weekend. So we went in to that Newcastle round, nothing to lose. We were 50 odd points back, so it was actually quite a decent margin. We had to haul back. Turned out we had a dream weekend, clean swept the weekend, and PD had a shock and we won by 96 points. So it was a big turnaround, and there was, for me, no better statement to say I'm ready and bring on Supercars Championship for 2018.
Mate, I think you said you were ready, because, I don't know how much you remember of the accident, and I don't know, how did it feel like at the time? Like, it probably happens that fast that you've kind of, next thing you know, you're upside down, covered in dirt and shit, thinking, how the fuck do I get out of here?
Yes and no. Like, obviously everything that led up to me getting hit happens pretty fast, and I think all drivers vouch for, you don't realise how fast you're going until you're not in control. That's when you really feel speed in circuit racing. and getting hit at 270 kilometers an hour, you certainly feel it. But yeah, just at the whole, I actually got really good recollection of events of it all. It kind of felt like it was in slow motion, to be honest. So, you know, from the moment I got hit, I knew I was pretty much fucked. Like, there's no other word for it. Like, when you walk the track and you go through that corner and you see the way that circuit's laid out, there's next to no runoff. And when you're got at that sort of approach speed, you know you're going to hit the wall. So it's okay, you're just bracing for impact, but you never expected the impact itself to be as spectacular as what it was. You don't know what to expect, obviously, but you're just hoping it's not big. But I just remember the biggest thing, that there's been a few injuries recently in supercars where drivers' legs were getting injured, and we implemented the leg protection safety for that weekend, luckily enough. But yeah, all I remember, as soon as I got hit, and obviously it's going backwards, I just remember keep myself pinned on the brake pedal to try and stop my legs from flying around on impact. Yep. Took my hands off the wheel and just remember going backwards, and it's just like that deafening wait, like waiting for the impact. And then once I got the impact, obviously it was pretty significant, like a lot of force on my back, but just sort of knowing I was in the air but not knowing where I was, and then just air ground, and then getting covered in mud. And it was the whole rollover sequence was, kind of remember just grunting a bit and gritting my teeth and then waiting, and then when it eventually stopped, I had no idea where I was in the car, partly because my glasses were covered in mud. Because obviously when it dug in on the ground, like the roof skin was gone, so essentially the whole roll cage dug into the ground. Yep. And being a soggy, standard wet weekend at Sandown, it obviously filled the car with mud, and I had a white race suit that was covered brown. I ran my visor open, so my glasses. So
no one knew that
mud.
you shit yourself.
Well, yeah, exactly. I had a pretty good cover up there, but it was white on the front, but not the back. Funny enough, but. So I didn't really know where I was in the car, and I remember thinking that I'd broken ribs because I was so badly winded. So I actually remember pushing my fingers into my ribs, thinking, "Shit, am I okay?" And then sort of realised once I got my breath, I'm alright. So first thing I did was unclip my harness, not realise I'm on the side, and half fell out the car with the cool suit pipe sort of holding me awkwardly in position. So then sort of stumbled out, and just remember looking at the car, thinking, "Far out, like what a mess." And then instantly, I felt like I wasn't at fault, but you didn't really know at the time. So instantly started shitting myself, thinking man, what's everyone thinking? And this is going to look bad, like so bad. And everything I've worked for is just going to fall apart now. And then straight away thinking, man, the car was, I knew the time was tight between the race and getting ready to go to the dummy grid for the next race for Super 2. So instantly go into panic mode, thinking, man, I'm not going to make it, just thinking the worst case scenario.
Because you had to get past medical as well.
Yeah, so obviously being a serious impact, I get taken straight to the medical centre, and my heart rate's just through the roof, because I'm not worried about me personally. I'm just like, man, I got to get in the other race car. Let's go.
Got a title win.
Get me the hell out of here. I don't want to be here. But obviously my heart rate was just, it was so high. I can't remember what it was, but they just said, no, we can't let you go. And I'm then trying to do deep breaths, but I'm angry and I'm frustrated, and it wasn't happening. And then it was only till my Super 2 engineer, Wes McDougall, sort of come in and sort of calmed me down and got me back into sort of a half understanding state, and sucked up a bit of pain so I could get through, and basically pleaded with the medical team saying, look, just if you can, I just want to get out of here and just want to get out of this race suit and at least get me the chance to at least be prepared for the next race, because obviously I just wanted to get the media stuff out of the way and just get ready. And did the interview. They said, we've got a lot of media here that want to do at least 5 or 6 interviews, and I just said, I'll do one with Greg Russ, and that's it. And I got halfway through the interview with Greg Russ, and instantly, because he was being sort of compassionate and supportive, and instantly just could feel myself welling up, and Rusty could see that, so he stopped and sort of patted me on the back and walked me back to the Super 2 area with Wes and my mum and dad. Mum was obviously a wreck. She had the chaplain looking after her, not that she knew at the time, but
she's the chaplain.
The chaplain reminded, they do an amazing job from behind the scenes. Mum didn't even realise that it was the chaplain at the time, but it was only rounds later where he reminded her, I was that guy, and by the way, I'm the chaplain. So, then when going back down to the Super 2 pit area to see obviously get ready for Super 2 car, and just seeing, it was just a sea of people just obviously offering their support, but it just it got too much, and just needed to put the helmet on behind the back of the pits, jump in the car, and then I drove to the dummy grid, got cleared. The medical team got me out of the car on the dummy grid, and got a lot of sort of respect from the other competitors asking if I was okay and stuff, which was nice. And did all the flexible movements and got the okay and put the helmet back on and drove out, and
yes, and then slept all that night.
I could. So it was that was a big weekend, but then what followed on for that was probably even more draining. Every phone call, every conversation you had was about the crash, and the last thing you want to do was talk about it. And you just wanted to move on. Whereas all of a sudden it started to sink in that, man, I'm going to be that kid that just crashed. Not the guy that's leading the championship, or not the guy that's potentially going to break into main championship, which was something that we were working on really hard behind the scenes, and that was stalling a lot of that momentum that we had. So that was in itself a bit frustrating, but fortunately we turned that negative into a positive, and we used the media exposure that we got and kind of created a bit of a story, if you call it, and turned a bit of a negative into a positive.
Awesome. And we will continue your career up to date, and we'll talk about your current season and your time at BJR a little bit later on.
Ready to turn your karting dreams into reality? Look no further than Karts Race Centre. Imagine hitting the track in the kart of your dreams, a ride that matches your budget and aspirations perfectly. With our pre-loved kart sourcing service, we make it happen. Our experienced team isn't just about mechanics, they're dream builders. We meticulously hand-pick each kart, ensuring reliability, performance, and sheer exhilaration. Whether you're a seasoned racer looking for an upgrade or a newcomer stepping into the world of karting, we're your pit crew, your partners in racing dreams. Get ready to feel the wind in your hair, the thrill in your heart, and the victory at your fingertips with Karts Race Centre, where dreams truly come to life. Visit prokartsracecentre.com.au or pop in for a chat at 30 Research Road, Karaka. Karts Race Centre, fueling your dreams, igniting your potential.
So we're going to talk about BJR. So this is your second season with BJR.
Correct. Yep.
And you are currently running, I have my notes here. Here we are. So your current chassis is BJR 011, which was the ex-Tim Slade car for 2018-2019 and your car from last year. And your engineer is Tony Woodward. Now, is that the same relationship from 2020, or did you go through an engineering change? Or
No, essentially we had no changes internally from my point of view. So same engineer with Tony Woodward, as you mentioned. Got the same mechanics, same tyre guy.
Yep.
Nothing's unchanged. Same data engineer with Randall. So we essentially started this year where we finished. We were pretty happy with our first year working together. I had a bit of time working with Tony Woodward back in 2017 as a co-driver. Mm-hmm. So it already kind of started our relationship in some ways before the start of last year. Obviously COVID interrupted season, challenging for many different reasons, but we were pretty happy with our first year working together. We felt we were probably a bit unlucky with a few mechanical gremlins and a few other elements that didn't come into play.
Yep.
I think in the perfect world we should have been probably just outside the top 10 in the championship, but we weren't. So we went into this year pretty confident, but this year's been a bit of a lean start to the year, I'm not going to lie, but it's not from a lack of effort and a lack of trying. We've been putting in some tremendous hours, and we're still hustling harder than ever to try and get our form back, and particularly qualifying is what is hurting us at the moment, because our race car has been so far so good.
Yeah, I guess we'll take it back a step, and we can touch on the COVID year in terms of the challenges and that type of thing, because it was unlike anything we've ever seen. And at one point, it looked like there may not even have been a season, really.
Correct.
And then obviously it culminated at Bathurst, which we'll cover in a sec as well. But, describe it. What was it like in the trenches?
Yeah, pretty wild. And I think, like everyone's got their own version of it, and it's pretty doom and gloom. So, obviously, for us, we sort of went into the Melbourne Grand Prix weekend thinking that, what COVID wasn't really a thing here in Australia. It was something that we could hear about, but didn't really know enough about of how serious it was becoming. And I'll be honest, I was pretty naive about it.
We all were, really.
Thinking this is crazy. Come on, let's just get on with on with the job, and I'm sure it will sort itself out, because that's just, I suppose, based off the knowledge that I had at the time. But obviously it all eventuated pretty quick, and then you start hearing about obviously the personnel at McLaren had potentially tested positive. We weren't quite sure at the time, and then we heard some F1 drivers had already left the track and flown halfway back to Europe before the announcement had been made. So it was pretty clear that F1 weren't going to race, and we were getting ready for qualifying. It was still business as usual for us. So I had my helmet on, waiting for an announcement. They said, yep, everyone's in meetings and this and that and the other, and kept waiting with our race suit on. Eventually it started to become ridiculous, and was hearing that the crowds weren't going to get let in and all sort of stuff. And obviously they canned it, which was crazy. I hadn't had a cancelled race meeting since dirt karting from a washout. Let alone people being sick and a global pandemic about to hit us. So I kind of remember going home that week thinking, geez, where does... And then obviously all the announcement come out, everything's delayed, and it's going to be maybe 1 month, and then it's 2 months, then it's nearly 3 months before we're back racing again. And obviously it's just straight away you just obviously resort to damage limitation. So you try and obviously manage all your sponsors, and you're managing every element from that backwards, trying to ensure have we sort of job? Like, we got 55 people working full time at the factory that we've got no race cars to work on. There's all these elements that are developing and unfolding, and we're fortunately we're very lucky as a sport that we sort of come up with a few concepts, obviously try and keep the corporate dollar in the sport, and obviously with the E-Series, which was kept us all busy and entertained while everyone had their bums at home and had nothing else to watch on TV. As far as sport was concerned, we were the only sport currently in the world that could produce a live telecast and bring humour to the people watching at home.
I'm curious to know, because we've got Dr. Sim right next to you. Right, I'm curious to know what that was like behind the scenes and how that all worked, because when we first saw it on TV, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like, and the ratings went through the roof.
It did, and it captured a massive audience. We after seeing all the TV reports, we essentially engaged into about 500,000 new fans to the sport. Essentially, is what it achieved for us racing in esports. So obviously, it's a massive sector within itself, but completely untapped from a supercar point of view. So it was really cool. I didn't actually have anything at home to race with. So in a matter of about 2.5 weeks, I went from obviously crisis mode of trying to work out what the hell am I going to do with my life, and do I still have a job in three months' time. Sponsors were sort of questioning what was going on. It was a bit scary, to be honest. And then as a sport, we said, hey, this is a concept, can we make it happen? And all of a sudden, drivers were getting sent all bits of equipment. I had my Logitech G27 that I used to just put on the desk for a bit of fun now and then. So I dragged that out of a box and put that together, and I did the first few rounds of that, and all of a sudden it started to get quite serious, as races being races. We're all trying to find the competitive edge, and drivers are doing deals with sim brands and all this sort of stuff, trying to get new equipment. And I learnt so much I can't remember how many rounds it was now, but
6 or 7.
In a short space of time, I went from being absolute, didn't know anything about e-racing. I knew all the details about the computer, how to set up my pedal box, and having the proper monitor for it all. And it was amazing how much time I found just in myself in that short period of time. It was pretty cool. It certainly killed some time while being locked down.
But I mean, when you came back to racing, you guys were Eastern Creek, Nick obviously getting a couple of race wins there, you getting a podium as well. The pace was there pretty much for this. I mean, there was only really out in the Northern Territory where it was, you had a Barry Crocker, really. Outside of that, for the majority of the year, you're pretty solid.
Yeah, exactly. No, we had a goal in mind of, let's not use COVID as an excuse to put our feet up and not work on race cars. We worked on a lot during that time behind the scenes, and it's, great testament to the crew for staying committed during those tough times. And obviously everyone was on JobKeeper and doing it tough and not really sure about what job, who was going to be going to the race meetings, and because there's a lot of people that got cut, so it was really hard for some people that live and breathe racing that simply were staying at the workshop waiting to see what would happen. So we come out the blocks firing. Potentially nearly got my first race win, my first round back, if it wasn't for a rear roll bar failure, which was frustrating. But then we backed it up with a podium following round, and we had a pretty solid year. year. You know, as I said before, our inconsistency was frustrating. We had a lot of sort of mechanical failures, but in a year that was so mixed up in some ways, you know, in some ways the result was one thing, but just going racing was
a winner itself.
Yeah, that was the win for us as a sport.
Yep.
Because obviously there's still people that were locked down in Melbourne, and we had our crew were away for 16 to 18 weeks away from families. You know, we're talking about guys that are they're normal people. They've all got families, they've all got kids at home, and hearing the stories while we're away, while we're away, obviously we're doing our thing and we're racing, but we're all hanging out. We're actually having quite a good time. I personally loved it. It was probably the best 16 weeks of supercars racing I've ever had, because it just felt like we were racing. There was no PR hoo-ha going on behind, leading into the events, or there was no sort of, there was no politics involved. It felt like it really united everyone in some way.
Yep.
And we were just going from event to event, racing week after week. It was really enjoyable. And, for me, being new to the team at BJR and only having one race meeting under my belt before COVID hit, it was a perfect way for me to sort of grow that relationship with the guys there, and felt like I'd become more part of the family by the time, obviously, we spent so much time on the road together.
Yeah.
It was really cool. But
how have you found BJR? I mean, what are they like as a team in comparison to Matt Stone? I mean, they're probably chalk and cheese. I mean, Brad's been around for a fair while.
Yeah, there's a few similarities, definitely on the basis that you've got the family name that comes from racing, lives and breathes racing, and racing is their passion, number one, foremost. Like, that's their number one focus, is get race results. And yeah, your painted workshop floor comes that's a very low priority on the shopping list. So, Brad's a racer, Matt's a racer, so there's, definitely similarities there, but obviously having someone that's achieved so much as a driver and to run the outfit that he does in a regional town of Albury, that's not discrediting Albury by any means, or the Wodonga region, but to do what they do in a regional town at an elite level compared to all the other teams is, there's challenges there, and they've faced them all, and I think they do a bloody good job. We do everything in house now. We do all the fabrication, do all the CNC machining. We have an amazing design team that take on the challenges of obviously trying to succeed in supercars. So we're essentially the biggest team in pit lane now. We've got 55 people working full time there, and I feel incredibly lucky to work with such a great bunch of people, because they all get along, they all backslap each other, and it's really rare in any business to have that many people getting along, because they all go to work with each other, and they all go to the pub, then they'll hang out on the weekend. Like, it's very rare to have that strong bond that comes down to Brad, managing those people and creating that atmosphere as a workplace.
Getting that family.
Yeah, and it really is a family orientated, structure that he runs, and I've been lucky because I've ironically raced against Macaulay all through karting, Formula Ford, Super 2 to now. So we had a pretty good level of respect, and obviously knowing Brad from karting days, to obviously working with him now is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, we can talk about, the 1000 was a disappointment for you last year. I almost felt like it was a sense of lost opportunity, maybe. Like you had all the pace all the way through the year, and you get there and it just didn't quite materialise.
Yeah, it just fell short on us. And it was... I still haven't finished a Bathurst 1000 on the lead lap. It's a cruel place, I'll tell you. Like we had a good amount of time to prepare for that event, so we sorted the gremlins that we have with the car. We got the cars finally back in the workshop after being away for 18 weeks. So preparation was good. Went in there, excited to see what we could achieve. I felt like we had a strong pairing. I felt like Jordan was doing really good things in Super 2, but unfortunately, just come unstuck, and race ended very early. It's kind of got out of the car in the first stint. We comfortably moved forward. I said to Tony, car's hooking up. I think the track's going to come to us. It's going to be good. Pace was looking pretty solid for Jordan. Had the helmet on ready to get in for my double stint, and it's the second time now I've stood in pit lane with my helmet on where the race has ended. So
how deflating is it though when you're that?
It's honestly that place, and obviously that it means so much to you as a driver, because we all dream of racing there for one, and then to actually be part of it is special. But what that place brings to you as far as feeling and sensations go leading up to the event is like no other. You can't compare it to anything else, and that's why it makes it so special if you are successful there. But man, it's a cruel place. You go there and you think, you dream about it, you visualize what it's going to feel like to be successful there, or even just do a good lap. And it kind of felt like it wasn't the perfect weekend, but we knew that we were sort of the silent achiever in the background. We sort of had solid top 10 pace, but qualifying we just missed out and so forth. So we went to shootout, but Nick was fast, and then Nick had they had power steer issues, and then by the end of the day it became an absolute nightmare for the team. Like Nick basically had gremlins all day. We crashed out. Macca and Jack crashed into each other, and then Jack had a tyre failure with only a handful of laps to go when he was running a personal best result. So it just went from one disaster to the next. So it was really disappointing to end the year because we were actually, I think, fourth. We were fighting for fourth in the team's championship.
Yeah, I remember.
And we ended up falling right back in the standings, which really hurt us. We should have probably finished ideally 12th or 11th in the championship. Finished 17th. Like, it was just the one round where it's double points, there's 300 points up for grabs, and it just killed us. But that's the beauty of motor racing. You have your ups and your downs day, and hopefully we've put that past us now, and we can go into Bathurst this year. We'll be motivated, we'll be hungry again, and we'll
And you got yourself
redemption.
You got the Fonz. You've actually got and the first time you've actually got an experienced co-driver with you is in Dean Fiore.
Yeah, really excited. Obviously he's got a huge amount of experience. He finished 5th at the 1000 last year, so he brings a lot to the table, and he's just a ripper bloke. I've spent a few days with him now, and just a really nice guy, and I feel like we're going to get along really well. We're pretty similar height, so he gets in and out of the car nicely, and he knows the drill. I know it sounds cliche, but he's been there, done it, and he's experienced the highs and lows, so he understands from a co-driver what's required. And being a rookie myself and being in that position, it's tough. And I've tried to coach drive. I've had rookies in the last 3 seasons that I've raced at Bathurst and done my best to obviously coach it and manage it, but it is a tough challenge, and especially with no lead up enduro anymore. Obviously we don't have the Sandown 500 to essentially have a warm up. It's just straight into the big one, the big event, the 1000, and it's cruel to be a rookie and get thrown in. It's too much to ask for, to be honest. So to have someone ready to go, can't wait to see what we can do.
We'll touch on some topics that have obviously been circling the sport at the moment. But Leigh, have you ever been to Bathurst? Have you ever been to the track?
No, I've not been to the track.
Mate, do yourself a favour if you ever get the opportunity. Go. I've personally been fortunate enough to go twice. I went, my very first Bathurst, which is nearest and dearest to my heart, was the 1998 2-litre Bathurst 1000. That was one of the last events I spent with my dad, and we went with my brother. So that was actually the first time I ever met Brad. I've got a photo of myself and Brad when he was in
the Audi.
The Oryx Audi. So I've got my brother on one side and myself on the other. And I've also got an Oryx Audi hat that had all of the 97 drivers' autographs. So Brad, Frank Beeler, Omrule, and Cameron McConville, if I remember correctly.
Very good.
But then, obviously, for me, I was an S40 fan. I used to follow the BTCC. So to see Jim Richards, who was at the time one of my all-time favourites, and then Ricard Rydell, who to me back then was God, right, to see that thing in the flesh was amazing. And then I went again in 2007. So it was, which was obviously I wanted to go and see a V8 Bathurst. So that was when the great man was a bee's diaphragm from getting into the sixes, I think, for a qualifier. It was Mark Scaife, and then Frosty trumped him.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that I find about Bathurst is that it's. Forget about when you go there, forget about what you see on TV. Correct. Because the track is it's only when you go there and you actually see it in terms of the pitches, the falls, the gradients, how narrow it is as well, that you actually appreciate what these guys next door do, right, in a modern car. But then for me, I sort of sit back and I think to myself, it's really the same piece of road that you have Moffat in a phase 3, right, having to pump the brake down the old Conrod, right, to try and actually get some brakes, to get some pressure there. And for me, it actually glorifies what those old guys, the legends, did back in the day.
And you feel that history when you're there.
Do you ever?
There's a few things around the circuit when you walk the track. You still see Camel Field with signage on the top of the wall.
Yep.
There's all these little things, and you obviously when you watch the sport for so long, you just imagine all these, fantastic moments in the sport and unfamous moments as well. It hasn't really, in some ways, it hasn't changed a lot at all.
Yeah.
So it's and that's what makes it so unique and so cool from a driver's point of view to race there.
Yeah.
Because there's literally nothing else like it.
Mate, when you go there, I live vicariously through you for that whole weekend.
It's on my bucket list. I'm definitely I've got to get there and make a weekend of it. I always do a big Bathurst. I'm always at a big Bathurst party. Getting there and doing a Bathurst.
You have to bring a tent and bring a slab of beer. And
I reckon we should do
can I run a power cord off of your RV? Yeah.
I reckon we should do it. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I reckon we should do a Bathurst trip
podcast.
We'll do it.
We can live the old days. You get the patrol, I'll get the trailer back off of Gaddy, and we can throw the flags of the tent in there, and we'll road trip it up.
Yeah. But look, mate, if you do it, it's a magic place. I've really wanted to go again, and it's for me. That was the thing as a kid. Still is. I still want to race there. I still want to go. And at least it will never be 1,000. But my dream is to actually race there, and I couldn't give a shit if it's a Hyundai XL, right in the XL series. It's just to race there and just say
it's special.
I've done it. You can't. Yeah,
you get the same feeling if you ever get the chance to go to Monaco and walk the streets of Monaco. The Armcos are there. You walk through the tunnel. You see the elevation changes and how narrow it is into the hairpin and all that sort of stuff. It's just I can only imagine that it'd be the same sort of flooding of memories, all the things you've grown up watching on TV. You walk up the mountain straight and you just see all the memories of Scaife ending up on the side of the track on lap 1 just to put that in there. But anyway, it's I look forward to getting there, and hopefully it's in your era while you're still racing, so I can have my Hazelwood t-shirt on and ready to go.
Hey, you know what? Don't worry about bring back the repercharge. How about hashtag let's go to the mountain? We'll do that.
Hashtag run a repercharge at the mountain.
I've got the cart and the trailer. Well, let's go. All right. So what we're going to do is we'll just do. I'll get your recap of Symmons Plains, which was the event that just happened last time. Last event. And obviously you're racing it at the Bend this weekend, so we'll recap that. But the build-up to the event was who was going to stop SVG, because let's face it, he's been shit hot right now.
Yeah, he's in a very much purple patch at the moment.
Yeah, but then they were also going to a track which was always AAA dominant. So it was almost a case of, well, is it going to stop? But then you had talks of Parity come up, and then obviously the streak was broken, and then but there was talk of Gen 3 coming up, and then there's the paddle shift debate. So it's all this stuff that's actually been circulating in the background. But so race 6 was obviously Van Giz. You had Wing Cup, you had Di Pasquale, you had Chaz in 4th, you had Will Davison 5th, you had Cam Waters in 6th, you had Frosty in 7th, Scott Pye, your mate, in 8th, Will Brown in 9th, Brody in 10th, and our buddy here in 14th.
Not good enough.
So you touched on it before. You've had issues. I mean, what's been the change between last year to this year? Because it's the same car.
Yeah, correct. Look, internally, it hasn't been a lot of changes at all. Obviously, we're trying to work on the same processes and trying to work on what makes our cars go fast. And obviously, last year worked well for us. And if for whatever reason, this year there's not too many differences, and we're really, not really struggling, but we just haven't got it right, is what I will say. I felt like, Bathurst was a big eye-opener. It was...
The 500?
We essentially struggled big time there. We had a lack of pace, both in qualifying and the race. But then we turned that around at Sandown, but it was mixed up with weather, and, we had a bit of a messy weekend. We actually had one unfortunate pit stop error, which is very much a rarity in BJR, because every other pit stop this year has been lightning fast.
Yep.
And we felt like we had a top 10 car and walked away with 2 14ths and an 8th. And then we went to Symmons Plains. We were inside the top 10 both practice sessions. Quietly confident going to qualifying, to be honest. We felt like we were on top of it. The car was responding well, and then we were outside the bottom 20 in all 3 qualifying sessions, and it was the same across the board for BJR, apart from Jack in qualifying on Saturday, which he did a great job. But for whatever reason, we just can't seem to get the new tyre to switch on in the cool conditions, it's just killing us, because our race car and the way it looks after its tyre has been really good. So we're obviously, there's a lot of different theories, and we've tried a lot of stuff in a short time that we've had, but you never know if you've got it sorted until you actually prove it to yourself and you put the car on the track and you get a result. So for us now, it's still, we're going through the grind process, and hopefully going to Tail and Bend this weekend. We're on top of it. Obviously, very different style of circuit. We were pretty competitive here last year, but it doesn't mean that we're going to roll the car at the track and be on the money. So we just got to keep focused and keep working on what our issues are, but at the same time not lose sight on the good stuff as well, because we had a fast race car. We passed more cars than anyone else at Simmons Plains.
20-something, wasn't it?
Obviously, it means we're not qualifying well enough, but we have got that ability to at least have some benefit, that being a fast race car. So I don't feel like we've got top 5 pace. I think we've got pace from probably 6th to 11th. That's the sort of window that we're sitting in at the moment. So I think any day we're inside the top 10 is a good day for us at BJR. And obviously, the ultimate goal is to be winning, but we're just trying to get back to what we know is competitive, and then we'll keep growing from there, similar to what we did last year.
Yeah. I'll just quickly run through the race results of races 7 and 8. So race 7 was on the Sunday, and it was Wing Cup first, Van Gisbergen second, Will Davison third, Cameron Waters fourth, Will Brown fifth, Chaz in sixth, Mark Winterbottom in seventh. Then you had Dave Reynolds in eighth, Scott Pye in ninth, and then Andre Heimgartner in 10th, and you came to 14th, coming from, I think, near the rear.
Favourite number. 14.
Yeah.
14 and 14.
And then race 8 was obviously Chaz Mostert finally winning a race for Walkinshaw Andretti United. Then you had Anton Di Pasquale and Will Davison. Cam Waters in 4th. You had Wing Cup in 5th, SVG in 6th. So the streak was well and truly broken by that stage. Zane Goddard, that was actually a good story. Get CMSR back up there. Then you had Dave Reynolds in 8th, James Courtney in 9th, with also the save of the day. And then you had Nick Percat in 10th, so leading BJR runner, and then you were in 16th, but again, having to come back from the rear, I think, as well. So clearly race paces there, just got to get your qualifying right.
Yeah, correct. And by the final race, we sort of burnt up our tyres from racing so hard in the first 2 races. But frustrating weekend, but race was. I felt we maximised our weekend with what we had, but by all means, certainly not happy with what we achieved. So
I'll quickly touch on some dot points. I want to get some single word answers from you because we've got heaps to cover. But parity debate, does it exist? Yes or no?
No, not currently.
Cool. Okay. Cool. You want to expand on that?
Cam Waters was pole. In 2 of the 3 events, so they got fast car. Those cars were winning all of last year quite comprehensively. The rules have not changed. There was an article that got leaked on Speed Cafe about an aero tweak for the Holdens. That's bullshit. It was actually a cooling flap on the inner guard, which is actually making the car more draggy. So it's actually slowing us down, but we're actually trying to reduce airbox temp or engine bay temp. Essentially, we're trying to get air out because with the modifications we had to make at the end of 2019 to try and make the cars competitive to the Mustang, we had to make a massive front under tray to get front downforce, and the result of that is we're now getting increased engine bay temp. So actually, essentially made a hole in the right wheel well to try and get some air out. So that's the only change. There's some talk about the rocker ratio on the KRE motors changing, and that's been an issue for a number of years now because Tickford were the only team that didn't change it. And if you actually have the data and you're seeing the data that we see, there is an advantage at the high horsepower circuits that they have, hence why they seem to be very fast at Bathurst, ironically. So they're throwing the parity word around, but I think the cars is probably as even as you're ever going to get it without doing some serious aero testing. But I think results have shown last year the cars were the same and we had Fords winning. This year I think Shane's in a league of his own and he's improving equipment. There's been a lot of drivers that have sort of gone from team to team this year, so there's a lot of uncertainty in some teams, like say Shell V-Power. They got fast cars but they've got drivers finding their feet, simple as that, but they're all both on the podium on the weekend. So I'd say the parity's been put to bed.
All right. So we've touched on, obviously, this is some stuff that I wrote down. Triple 8 and SVG form. I mean, they've got pace. I mean, whatever homework they've done over the off season has clearly borne fruit because J-Dub is not a bad way to go retirement year and he's still kicking ass. So clearly they're still on song. We've touched on your season. Win Cup contenders. So I think Roland Dane released, a short list of 6. Although I call bullshit. I reckon there's others on there that they haven't actually spoken about as well in terms of who's actually going to get the coveted Win Cup replacement seat. I don't know. What are your thoughts, mate?
I think every driver put their hand up for it initially, but obviously everyone's contractually obligated to what they got to do for their own teams. But obviously a big news story. You'll kind of hear about him talking about retirement, but you kind of don't expect it just because he's at the top of his game. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what plays out. Hard to say, really. I don't know.
Have you got money on someone? If you had to put your on death's door, you had to pick a name. Who do you see it being?
I don't know, to be honest. I've got mixed views. Obviously there's a lot of talk about Brock potentially filling in, but whether or not Triple Eight go down the route of, obviously being one of the powerhouse teams of the sport if they put a rookie in, but maybe Gen 3 would mask that if that's to be introduced. So obviously he's within the team, and that's seen as a prime candidate. Outside of that, I really don't know. I hear that there's some drivers that have been linked to the drive but are actually already locked away from a contractual team point of view.
Contracts don't mean nothing.
But yeah, exactly. Look, I think what was potentially going to be a quiet off season could get quite messy. So time will tell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been put out in the public that Chaz was linked to Triple Eight. Then there was talk of Cam Waters being linked to Triple Eight, but Cam's pledged his allegiance to Tickford.
I'm going to throw caution to the wind. I think Brodie Kostecki out of Erebus into Triple Eight, and they put Brock into Erebus for a mentoring role.
Yeah.
To get mentored up to then take over from SVG or Brodie when they move on.
And you've got the boost link in there as well. So, yeah. Speaking of, and I'll touch on Gen 3 in a sec, but we can't go past the, I suppose, the wild card. Did any of you guys actually see Russell Ingall making a comeback on the...
I did. I didn't see it coming, but I did see I got a phone call and said, Russell Ingall's coming back for Bathurst. I've kind of
what?
Had to process what they said. Wow, okay, but kind of figured that Triple Eight would try and do something with Brock to get him in the car, particularly not being as a co-driver capacity this year. But to bring Russell Ingall back, what a good PR stunt, I'd say. Way to create some interest and obviously support from Supercheap. So good on them, and hopefully they have a clean race.
Well, what it has done is it's stirred Adderton from Boost into action about getting a wild card in for Richie Stanaway and Greg Murphy, and that's actually really generated some momentum. There was talk that Ryan Story actually went public and offered a Mustang, but there's also rumour going around that it might be a Walkinshaw Andretti United third entry because of Greg Murphy's GM links, but it's not going away. And I don't know how much spins on it with Adderton's posts and stuff like that, but you'd almost suggest that it looks like it's actually going to happen.
Adderton loves some PR though.
Yes, exactly.
Actually,
time will tell. Is what I would say.
If you got, I don't know whether you listen to Below the Bonnet, but if he actually featured on their last episode on their podcast, and it was
the best.
It was brilliant, and the amount of people that actually turned around and said he actually raises some really good points about the sport, which I mean, we touch on social media hate a fair bit, and I know you're an advocate of that too, but some of the shit that we read by some of the supporters out there about the naysayers and the
comment section in a Supercars article or Speed Cafe, you'll fry your brain. But
good old inbreds in Supercar threads.
Yeah, look, you just...
Dude, brain's fried.
I've been getting some direct messages and stuff, and you do wonder the thought process of some people, but at the same time, people are passionate about our sport, which is, if we don't have fans, we don't have a sport. We just got a bunch of cars running around in circles. So we need these people to be passionate, and we do need to listen to the minority of what some people are saying, because if we don't listen, then we'll be stuck in our ways and we won't have a sport in 10 years' time.
Yeah. Gen 3, obviously we've touched on, you touched on that before, and you hear whoever you speak to, there's talk of whether it is or it isn't. Is it going ahead? Is it not going ahead? What do you know? What do you don't know? Paddle shift, non-paddle shift. What's your take on it all?
You were saying before, quick answers. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the very short and probably only answer as far as Gen 3 is concerned. A bit concerning, obviously, not having a lot of information, being at the 5th month of the year now, and nothing's tested, nothing's signed off, and it's a big change for the sport because obviously there's a big push to save money, but you also got to spend a lot of money as far as starting again, building new race cars over the off season, putting massive man hours in to turn things around. So I hope for the good of the sport that it comes together and they achieve the goals that they were setting out to achieve, but I personally don't know enough to have a say. We had our first small snippet of information on the previous event where they come to us with a tender for a steering wheel and are asking about concept, whether they like the GT open wheel style type or the traditional type that we have, and there was paddles attached to one design but not the other. So obviously there was a few questions that were raised there, and that was probably the most I learned about Gen 3 in that 5-minute questionnaire than what I have the whole time in this whole. But yeah, I simply don't know enough, and all I can say is fingers crossed they get it sorted, because obviously being in the sport for this long now, and it's a big chapter of my career for the next few years coming up, so I hope they get it right.
Yeah.
What's your take on the paddles versus shifter? Are you all about the authenticity of the sport, the roots with having the shifter there to change, or you just don't care how the gears get changed as long as it makes good racing?
Mate, I'll drive anything that's put in front of me, but at the same time, I'm a big advocate for something that needs, as a sport, it needs to be entertaining. If we don't have a sport that's not unique, not different, not stale, something that people turn the TV on and go, that's cool, like I like the sound of it. Those guys look superhuman because they're swinging off anti-roll bar adjusters, they're making brake bias adjusters. You don't see that in F1. You don't see a driver in DTM reaching over to the left and rev matching and heel towing and doing all these cool things. That's kind of been lost from the sport around the world, apart from supercars, and that's why we have so much respect outside of our country for supercars, but yet here in Australia, I won't say people are lucky, but they just don't know
how lucky they've got it.
How different we are, which makes us unique, and we need to keep that, because if we don't have a sport that's not loud and fast and proud of who we are, and it comes down to the DNA of the sport. If we don't have that, I don't feel we're no different to GT racing, apart from the fact that we're going to have no ABS and no traction control, which So obviously I'd love to see the sequential shifter stay, because I think it's a good visual element for the people watching at home, and from a driver point of view, it's definitely a challenge. If you got a paddle shift, it just takes all the challenges out of it, and it like being a late breaker, you use a lot of engine brake as well, so that takes that element out of it. So it's all of a sudden you drive into the same ability of the car in front. You're not going to see people lunging up the inside because you can't use the gears to pull it up, because the way a paddle shift system, compressor system will work, it won't allow you to do that. So obviously I'm a bit anti for it. I'm not going to make as much noise as other people because I don't want to be detrimental to our sport. I always want to be seen promoting it, but as I said, hopefully the voices are heard and they make the right decision.
I think as a whole, and I agree with everything you've said, but I also think that the public as a whole don't really, they've lost the appreciation for the product that's actually displayed. It's all this, free-to-air TV, the racing's this, it's boring, it's this and that. The quality of racing is improved, and the quality of driving is improved to such an extent, right, that the races are so clean now. If you watch some of the stuff from the mid-90s, it was rough as guts,
and there was a lot of clumsy stuff too.
Yeah, exactly right. Whereas now, I mean, the precision of the driving and the skills of the drivers now, and the quality of the equipment and everything else, it's fantastic. I love it. And I've always been a massive advocate for the V8 Supercars. I'll love them, and no matter what category they do, but what direction they take. But I honestly think that I think the public have just got to take a deep breath and actually appreciate what is actually in front of them, and just how good we've got it.
Yeah, look, and you won't keep everyone happy. That's just Australian society. Unfortunately, everyone loves to hate and loves to bag winners or loves to bag something good. So
tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah, we just got to take the good with the bad, and as I said, hopefully we get it right. And we're in an interesting time as a sport, because obviously we've lost Holden, core part of DNA of our sport. There's no local manufacturer here in Australia. That's reality. And I don't think that's setting with a lot of people yet. People are like, oh, you need to bring the back to the 70s mentality. That's gone. Like, it doesn't happen. If you watch, when was the last time someone watched an improved production race and going, oh, that was awesome, the car sounded sick and they were fast? Like, reality is they're not. So a TCM car would absolutely smoke what Brocky did in 1979 as far as a Tirana, how it's built now to back in those days. So, it's hard putting it all in perspective, but I think we just got to get the entertainment factor right, because we have lost DNA of our sport. There's some key things that are going on behind the scenes that we need to get right. So I've got my fingers crossed that they come up with the goods.
It's funny that you say that, though. I have this debate with some mates of mine that we've been watching the V8s for years, but for me, I love it how you read some of these the fans and how they talk about like the old, bring back the old days of this, the that, the other, showroom relevance. Mate, they haven't made a showroom relevant Falcon and Commodore since the V8 formula started back in 1993. Let's be honest. Like, you tell me when you can buy a VP Commodore with front spoiler and a rear wing the way it was, and
it's actually cheaper. So obviously in the early 90s there was still production based chassis being built into race cars, which was actually a very expensive process, because you actually essentially had to get a shell, acid dip the thing 1,000 times to make the sheet metal lighter, and then start building a race car and essentially throw away a whole car's worth. Whereas now we actually have a purpose-built race car, so you start from scratch. It's safer, it's lighter, it's cheaper to build. So people don't understand that element either. There's a lot of reasons as to why we've gone into this path. I think a big thing for our sport is that we need to get rid of the engineering masturbation that's happened in the last 10 years of our sport, because we've had a lot of money from manufacturers in time, and that's propped up our sport to be able to be so aggressive with making an uncontrolled upright and have all these different pickup points and so much tunability with roll bars and uprights and all the rest of it. Even our motors, like, there's no reason why the sport should have a $120,000 V8 naturally aspirated pushrod motor. It costs that much, it's just mind-blowing. But because there's so much engineering, design and effort that's gone into make these cars to have so much power for so little fuel, to save fuel in the fuel races, it's just another element that's just gone out of control. So we need to bring those things back into perspective, and I think if we get all that right, our sport will grow, because it will be more affordable, it will be more accommodating for bigger brands to get involved, and I think we're not far off from being something good. We're just probably overstepped the mark a bit, and we don't have the corporate dollar support anymore, so we just need to take a couple of steps back, rejig it a little bit. Like you said, we can make the cars look cool. Obviously, we've got the Mustang Beetle currently racing around there at the moment, but if we tune that up, there's no reason why we can't have cool cars back on the track that still sound good, still relative to our core fan base, which will bring people out to the track.
Here. Well said. We've got MotoGP and Formula One and that to talk about. I don't know, do we do a synopsis or do a summation of it, or do we go into detail of it? Because
we can do either that, or we can do a separate episode with Formula One in a few days' time. It's up to you, mate.
Oh, okay. Well, I suppose while you're here, we may as well make the most of you then. We'll cover Formula One in another podcast, because I've got another 2 pages of talking points, and that's MotoGP and all that sort of stuff as well.
That's another podcast for sure.
Whilst we've got the opportunity to have you here, because the likelihood would be is that, well, you're going to be here for the Taylor Men 100. We know that much. But
Science will deliver now.
Science will deliver now. It's set in stone. It's President's orders. All right, mate. Tell us about Todd Off Track. You've got a project going with a Ford Zephyr.
Yep. So
tell us a bit more about that. How did that all come about?
Yeah, Todd away from the racetrack. Locked away in Melbourne now by myself. We're living with my sister. I've got a 3x9 shed that's filled with car parts. So currently restoring a very long-term project. I think I actually got the car off the farm when I first started working with Leigh.
Yep.
So back when I was a little 12-y, literally a 12-year-old.
Yep.
And didn't get to work on it until obviously when racing got serious when I was sort of 14, 15. Much to Dad's frustration, it all sort of sat half stripped in the side of the house shed, and never got to see it really until halfway through 2018 season. Put it in the back of the supercar transporter, lugged this 1955 Mark 1 Zephyr up to Queensland, started working on it there, and then obviously had to change of teams and then moved to Melbourne started last year. So the poor old Zephyr's done more laps on dolly wheels than what I think it's done in its whole life. But yeah, it's currently very deep in full restoration mode at the moment, and that I love working on stuff. I've always been sort of hands-on as a kid, and I sort of miss that element now that I'm now involved in the Supercars Championship, where essentially I don't want you touching the car. The boys are doing their job and they do it well, so I don't interfere. But since my time leaving Matt Stone Racing, I don't really spend too much time in the workshop. So that's sort of my avenue for fun. Get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I'd obviously love to try and get the thing done sooner rather than later. Been able to dedicate a bit of time, particularly with COVID last year, got a fair bit done, and I was do a lot of late nights just working in the shed and just get the UE beam cranking and spend some hours to myself working away, and it's been good.
Therapeutic.
It is. I really enjoy it. So, got a lot of the underbody parts powder coated on the weekends. I've had that up in boxes for so many years now, so it's good to see that come to life. The engine's getting rebuilt at the moment as well, so that's actually surprisingly come apart not too badly. So just needs a set of needs a cam grind and crank grind and set of pistons and 10th thou more in the bore, and we'll slap that back together. And the next step is the body, which is something I've been putting off for a long time. So that's the biggest hurdle. But the car's essentially fully stripped. It's got to dedicate some time to get some old paint off it and do some rust repairs, and then hopefully have a nice lick of 50s lime green paint on the end of it by the end of the year. Would be nice.
Ooh, just like the lights here, you reckon?
Exactly.
On the mic? Yeah, cool. I want to actually, I've been meaning to ask Leigh this question as well, for the both of you, and this is more of a, appreciating where you guys have got your inspirations from or whatever. So I'll throw it to you first because you're our guest of honour. You've touched on Ford, being the fact that you were a Ford boy from the early days, but who were your idols?
Look, obviously from a one-eyed Ford supporter, I grew up in a family that, heavily supported Dick Johnson Racing and DJ himself, so instantly born into that. So I essentially had no hope, really. But really, like from a professional point of view, I just admired anyone that was good. Obviously I grew up and I was a big fan of Lowndesy and Marcus Ambrose, but even had a lot of respect for the guys that were doing well. And that's for all forms of sport. Like, I really looked up to Roger Federer, just absolute champion, both as he played and the way he conducted himself, professionally outside of the sport, I thought was really cool. And that's all that sort of stuff I looked up to. And then, like, even, Jamie Whincup cops a lot of flack as, being Winch Cup or whatever, you want to call him. But he's one of the nicest guys in pit lane, and have so much respect for him as well. And, kind of admired him, growing up, because he was a guy that got thrown into the hardest seat possible, up against the hero Craig Lowndes, and absolutely smoked him. So, I always just admired people that did well in their field, and you study it and you analyse and you think, well, how do they achieve that? How do they get to that level? And don't really have anyone in particular per se, but they're probably the few standouts.
What about you, mate?
Yeah, so I didn't really ever have a Ford or a Holden or Ferrari or McLaren sort of one-eyed view of any racing, but growing up I was always watching Nigel Mansell or Damon Hill in Formula One, and then Craig Lowndes, the way that he went about business as well was always good to look up to him. And then off track a little bit, but some dirt races I definitely idolised a lot. Max Dumsney, I think it was, every night we get home from school, it was my Max Dumsney t-shirt went on. I was playing with my Max Dumsney sprint cars, and one of my cherished possessions now is a 1/18th Max Dumsney signed sprint car, die-cast model, and Gary Rush. So just same as what Todd said, it just was never about the team that the person was racing for. It was about the person themselves and the way they did their business, and what could I learn from them as to how to approach my own racing, so to make me the best human that I could be for racing. So we that's who I followed. We know you love Scafie, and Rickard Rydell.
Well, look, for me, I'm one of those ones that would categorise my so if it was Formula One, it was Ayrton Senna. Hence the bright yellow, it's a Rossi replica helmet of Mugello, but Valentino Rossi was up there too, but definitely Ayrton Senna by miles. And then I used to love Gilles Villeneuve, Jacques Villeneuve. At one point I remember, because back in 97 when Villeneuve was at his peak, I was still going through high school, you know. So, and that was what, year 10, year 11. So at one point I wanted to go bleach my hair peroxide blonde and spike it like Jacques, you know.
What have you been wanted to? We all know you did.
I got blonde tips. I couldn't get past mum. But Damon Hill, you know, those sorts of guys, and then, you know, but then I also respected, you know, Nigel Mansell and all that sort of stuff. Touring cars for me, well, yeah, Mark Scaife. I'm not gonna lie, that I idolised the guy. You know, like he was my hero. But deep down, I was a Blue Oval boy. But it was just Mark Scaife. You know, models, autographs. I've got HRT paraphernalia. I've got autograph caps, all that sort of stuff. Alan Moffat, I loved as well. You know, and the thing is, I had the good fortune of meeting these people, you know. I mean, I actually met Alan Moffat before I even met Mark Scaife. It was Bathurst, you know. And actually, no, Malalar 94, when I went to see them race at the Australian Touring Car Championship. I mean, how cool. You got Alan Moffat there in his leather brown bomber jacket. And
he's the Synovus EB Falcon.
No, he was commentator for Channel 7, but yeah, same thing. But, you know, it's like, g'day, mate, how are things at school? You know, it was like, well, there's Alan Moffat, he's asked me how things at school. But, you know, Scaife, Jim Richards, Peter Brock, you know, that sort of stuff. But, yeah, they were my idols, and, you know, but I mean, it's even now the modern drivers, obviously yourself, and that's not because you're here, it's the truth, you know. But you know, Dean Canto was a guy that I really liked, and had the good fortune of knowing as well. And, you know, Mark Winterbottom was probably one of my favourites too. But then you sit back, and Roger Federer is one of my favourite sports stars, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, the list goes on. But for me, it's, you know, getting their character traits and their personalities and then applying it, you know, having that focus, that dedication, even when I'm racing the four-stroke. So, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. But, I don't know, what else do we got to cover? Fire away.
Well, we're going to do a grinding of the gears, or what are you going to do?
We have a segment called What Grinds Leigh's Gears, right? So, what grinds your gears, mate?
I'm in on hire car companies.
Oh, yes. Talk about this, please.
So, I've done a bit of travelling between the last pod and now, only domestically. And in the day and age we live in, where we've all got a smartphone, well, you know, the majority of us will have our little smartphone with Google Maps and all our navigational systems on there. How hard is it for a car company to give us a car that comes with a navigational system, or the ability to have Apple CarPlay by plugging in the USB? I was driving around in Melbourne, and all I could do was sit my phone on the dash, which is illegal, mind you, and follow the maps on my phone, because the car would not pair with my phone. So not only is that more unsafe for the hire car companies to not do it by saving a few dollars, they're not really saving anything, because there's more likelihood of crashes and all that sort of stuff as well. So grinding my gears, hire car companies, pull your finger out and, you know, just a little bit of tech. Yeah. I don't need paddle shifters and a V8 motor. I'm happy with your Mitsubishi Outlander, but give me some Apple CarPlay. Pretty simple stuff.
What about you, mate? What grinds your gears?
I was going to say high car toll fees.
Yeah.
My gears.
Yeah.
So that's a little recent roast I'll give the high car company.
There's a forum now. We're 2 hours in. They're probably falling asleep by now, but no, go for it.
Yeah, got two up yours for that one. That one really hurt me. So anyway, that's what grinds my gears.
I was in Melbourne too, and we had to do all of the non-toll roads because I didn't want to pay for the tolls.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And then your GPS gets you lost. Yeah. So then you take a toll road and you get fined.
Exactly.
You don't realise
it's not good. And then it comes 3 weeks later in the mail, and you're like,
so you've missed payment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh man. I don't know.
Grinds both our gears.
Yeah, bloody hire car companies.
Unbelievable. Craig Denton actually approached me on the weekend and goes, "You want something for your podcast? I'll tell you, CMS and how unreliable it is, or Speed Hive."
That was
Yeah, they
what a waste of money that was, KO. Almost as bad a decision as dropping replicharges.
Yeah. Well, for me, look, I actually really like CMS. I think it's good, but you know, let's
CMS. Wait till you see a replicharge.
Yeah, well, exactly. But bring it back, we say. It's more the delay in the information and the fact that it can be inaccurate in terms of replying with the data. I think was the biggest issue. I think it was. There's nothing worse that you actually being at the track and you're trying to find out. You've come out at the end of it. You've looked at your Micron data. You think you've gone shit hot, but then you've got to wait half half an hour for the information to upload, and then by that stage you've already gone for the first heat, and then you've discovered what your qualifying is and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know whether it's down to infrastructure or how they've set it up, or, I mean, you'd know, both of you would know more than myself, but yeah, Craig, for him, was just the frustration of that delay of information.
Yeah.
Like,
especially for context, at points in the weekend it was 7 or 8 minutes behind. Like, you'd come in for qualifying and it still hadn't thought you'd rolled out. The next class was on track, you'd look at your phone and there's our class going around on lap 1 or lap 2 or whatever and still cutting lap times. It's like, I think it was just a delay between the server at Bolivar and the information getting to the tower and then being able to be pinged to the satellite in space.
And KA had, I was actually speaking to some of the officials at KA there, and they actually had to bring a lot of that infrastructure in for the meet specifically because they didn't have it there with them on hand. But
sometimes it doesn't matter what you do, depending on your location, it's just going to give you grief. You have a lot of people in the same area. We have that at Tasmania. You rock up there on a setup day and your reception's good, and by the time the fans turn up, you can't get your phone to upload an image to Facebook. So Yep. One technology.
All right, and I think before we wrap it up, there's a few questions I'll ask you while you're here. All right, favourite racing car?
Jeez, you stumped me.
Oh, I got him.
First question off the bat, and he's nicked one.
This is not a good start, is it? Okay, quick. Think.
It's all right, no pressure. We've got time.
Look, I'm
the gambler. The brown racing car gambler that's sitting up in the
Mark
shed.
II GT40.
Yep.
Le Mans.
Yep. Okay. Favourite racetrack?
Adelaide 500.
Yep. God, I wish they brought that back.
Hashtag bring it back.
Bring it back. We could talk another half an hour about that.
I could have a big rant.
Yeah. Mate, you want to do
Next. No. I get in trouble.
Grind your gears part 2 with Todd.
He doesn't need
Bring back that left
need a grid penalty already.
Best team, best friend in the pit lane.
I don't have any friends in pit lane.
Spoken like a true driver.
So I don't believe in the whole drivers club. I don't go riding out with any of the drivers or sit and have coffees with any of them. I'm very much me, myself and I sort of guy. But if I could pick one driver, I don't know. No, I'm going to have to say it's just my engineer, Tony. He's my best mate. We hang out.
Well played. Nice one.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone, so it'd just be a fake answer.
Yeah, fair enough.
Racing memory.
Best racing memory? Probably a road trips to Darwin, I reckon, in the karting days.
They were good fun.
Yeah, they were the best. So, yeah, starting from Adelaide and first stop at Port Augusta at Macca's first thing in the morning, and then road trip our way up to Darwin. And
Petey, and then whatever was next, Roxby.
Yeah. Yep. And, the Darwin's open state title was probably one of the most relaxed, enjoyable race meetings you could have in a kart. Speaking of that intense atmosphere, at Darwin it was not like that.
Not like that at all.
You honestly couldn't believe that you were racing for a blue pape. It was, very cool, enjoyable weekend.
We often did something else the week before, so it was often a 2-week trip generally. We did a race meeting the week before the state titles, like a shakedown, and then the state title the week after, and then drove back. And they generally had that the week before the V8 round, so it was depending which way you flipped. You either went for the go-karts and then did the state title and went home, or you did the state title and stayed for the go-karts. And good times.
Favourite V8 supercar?
All-time favourite V8 supercar? I've probably got a few, if I could be greedy.
Go.
So as far as supercar, I always love the BA Falcon, you know. So obviously the Marcus Ambrose era of his dominance in 03 and 04 and 05. And then probably dating back to the EB Falcon, one with the winglets on the front end plates.
So 94 era?
94 era, that was a pretty cool car. And then probably my 2017 VF, last of the real Holdens, if you per se. I was probably a bit biased, but when you design your own car and you have success from it, it's hard not to like it.
yeah, absolutely. Very quickly, who will win the F1 World Championship?
Verstappen. I hope.
Ooh, all right.
I had the same question posed to me today. I said Verstappen too.
Yep, okay, all right. Given the Grand Prix in Portugal, they'd probably want to lift their socks up.
No, I'm a Hamilton fan, but just for something different.
Yep, fair enough.
We were friends.
Break the trend.
Yeah.
Break the trend.
We were friends.
Whoops.
Who's going to win the MotoGP title?
Jack Miller.
Oh, I really hope Jack this is the start of something good. Obviously, he got his win. I felt like he had a pretty rough start to the year. I hope he gets his mojo together because the bike's fast. So, fingers crossed for Jack. He's a great ripper bloke, and hope he does well.
All right. Who will win the V8 Supercar Championship?
Look, I'd love to say I'm in contention, but I'm not off to the best start. But look, I think it's probably a battle between SVG and his competitive package and Chaz Mostert. I think between those two are going to duke it out. See what the Enduros bring with Wing Cup. I think he's a close wild card. I don't know if Cam. I think he's got the pace, but I don't know if he's got the complete package as far as race car and quali car to get enough points to be in the hunt end of the year, but could be wrong.
Yep. Okay. Will Jamie win a race in the 4-stroke class this year?
I hope so.
Well, you had some good tuition at the track the other day. So,
do you know what? I actually very quickly gave Kip Foster a couple of tips from our because he was struggling in the middle section of the track, and I had a look at the onboard footage that they had at the Petrucci course tent, and I remembered our driving when we went testing the other week, and Lee gave me some pointers, and I actually used those pointers for Kip, and he came back and sent me a message that night after his racing on the Saturday. He goes, bloody hell, they worked, right? And I'm like, give Lee credit.
Lee's the guru of Bolivar.
Leigh, the guru of Bolivar. But mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on board.
apologies, Adam.
Hey, Adam's not president anymore. Fuck him.
You've reached the checkered flag of another episode of Negative Camber, the Motorsport Show. A huge thank you to you, our incredible listeners. Your support and passion for motorsports fuels our enthusiasm to bring you the latest results, analysis, and interviews from the racing world. Keep that FOMO at bay by subscribing to Negative Camber on your favourite podcast platform. We'd also love it if you could leave us a review and share the show with fellow racing enthusiasts. Your feedback and support mean the world to us. Remember, Negative Camber is more than just a podcast. We're a community of dedicated fans who live and breathe motorsports. Follow us on socials, join us on our website, negativecamber.co, and be sure to subscribe to the Negative Camber Club for access to exclusive content, episode previews, and special deals from our amazing partners. A huge thank you goes out to our podium partners and our incredible sponsors. Your partnership allows us to continue bringing you this show and dive deeper into the world of motorsports. If your business adds value to the motorsport community, get in touch with us to become a Negative Camber partner. So until next time, stay fueled with passion, embrace the Negative Camber, and keep chasing those podium finishes.